So, I shared a little bit about my story. It was really challenging first starting our small scale biogas system. And everybody asked me, like, how on earth did you get into this? So I always like to circle back as to who I am. So I'm a mom. I have two beautiful children. In like I think it was like in 2012. My oldest was diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder and a variety of food allergies. And basically the doctor had told us I need to get all the toxins out of the house and I need to really focus on holistic nutrition and holistic living. And so that's what introduced me to permaculture and natural living, and of course then small scale biogas, right? Because dealing with living systems. So that's my background. Is I have a degree in special education. I have a master's degree in speech language pathology. And so really where all of this comes together is because it was such a rough start for me with so much trial and error, I decided to make an inclusive learning environment with information that is accessible to a variety of learners across many different ages and backgrounds. So what I like to do when I'm talking about small scale biogas is I like to compare and contrast to things that we are already familiar with. So when thinking about small scale biogas, we think about first thing that comes to mind is digestion. And small scale biodigester is basically like a stomach. And we're very familiar with digestion in our own bodies. And it's basically the same thing. So we're mimicking a stomach in which we feed this biodigester food, and it produces a liquid fertilizer, just like how all of us, go. And then it also produces methane gas. So in a way, it is sort of similar to composting, in which we are taking our food waste and we're going to be producing a fertilizer. But it's different than composting because it is completely anaerobic without air, and it's in a closed container that's filled with water. And instead of that methane just going into the atmosphere, we're actually capturing that methane so we can use it. And how do those, what are these microbes that do the work for us? So they're called the methanogens, or I like to call them the mighty methanogens. These are microbes that are the first living things that were on the planet. And so we can also call them the archaea. And they live without air, and they're in the guts of every single living creature. So in order to start our biodigester, you think of it as like a yogurt culture. So we need a culture to start with. So such as we can be using manures from our animals. So good manure sources are like cow manure. Ruminant animals are a great starter culture for starting our biodigester. And we could also use chicken manure, sheep. So, those manures start the biodigester. And once the digester starts to produce gas, that's when we know that we're ready to feed it. So it's a simple process of feeding the digester basically every day, feeding it the right kinds of foods, the right amounts, and in the right consistency at the right temperature. So it's basically kind of like feeding an animal. So if we are caretakers for ourselves, for our children, for our community and animals, basically you have all the skills that you need to take care of an anaerobic digester. So I like to compare it to like feeding the beast, right? So we're going to feed it bit by bit, which is just the right amount every day. So we're feeding it every day so we get nice, consistent gas production. We're going to avoid things that would float to the top of the tank, such as straw. We don't want to feed it that, and things that are too acidic. Feeding it a slush, a slurry, so it digests quickly, and then feeding it at the right temperature, which is essentially like body temperature. Pretty straightforward and easy. Essentially, in the whole when we're thinking about permaculture, it's all about fair share. And so when we take care of this anaerobic digester, this herd of microbes living inside this container that is mimicking a stomach, it is going to be giving back to us. And so we think of the ecological benefits that we get, such as using the fertilizer for soil restoration. We're keeping those food scraps in a closed container so it is not attracting flies and rodents. Weed control, using it as a foliar application, manure management. We keep pigs, and so all the manures from our pigs go into this biodigester, so there is like no smell. You could walk on our property up to the front door, which is less than 50 feet away from the pig pen. You would never know that we had pigs on property because we are managing our manures with the biodigester. Human health. I mentioned fly control, like we're going to be talking about in this presentation about sanitation and odor control. And then, of course, there's the third leg, which is economic, production of natural gas that is fossil fuel free, that is not fracked gas, right? And being able to save money. So you're not having to pay for propane. You're not having to pay for those lower level of uses of energy, such as cooking fuel or wood. And then thinking of it as creatively with like the liquid fertilizer and using it as a compost accelerator for something, those high carbon things such as wood chips and straw, so that if you had a composting CSA, you could be picking up more customers by putting food scraps that you typically wouldn't put into your compost into the digester, and then getting that added benefit of a quick turnover of that compost by, moistening the compost with the liquid fertilizer, which will make quick breakdown of that. And we're going to talk more about that too. So let's see if I can change here. Okay, so what we can feed the biodigester. So it includes things that, like I said, that we typically can't compost or compost easily, such as use cooking oil, grease, whey, and spoiled milk. Meat can go into the biodigester. And I like to think of like, what is your biogas potential? So my favorite thing about having biogas in my kitchen is that beautiful blue flame. I made that myself. That's my flame. And I just love looking at our biogas flame. Been doing it for over 10 years now, and it still makes me feel excited and happy because I know that I produce that myself, because we put our food waste into our anaerobic digesters, and that produces that cooking gas. And that just brings me so much joy. And so people ask me, like, why do you do this? I'm like, because it makes me happy. Other big benefits, we think of the Sustainable Development Goals from the United Nations. And really, in rural areas, small-scale biogas is so important because you're using that liquid fertilizer as a direct soil application. So if there's soil that is incredibly poor, that liquid fertilizer really helps to boost not just the nutrient value, but also the microbes that are in the soil itself. And so these are kind of like the basic sizes that you have for small scale digesters. They could start anywhere from like a little 55-gallon hobby barrel digester that you can make yourself, to some of these larger sizes that you can purchase online through Home Biogas. And there's certainly other sizes that you can make from barrels and IBC tanks. So basically, the thing to remember is scale and size. So if you're thinking of like a family of 4 and you want to have like about 1 to 2 hours of cooking gas a day, having a digester that is about 1 to 2 cubic meters, which is like roughly like 250 to like about 400 gallons. So that right there would be like the Home Biogas 2. So it's like about a 350-gallon digester. And, like the larger digesters, that is such as like the Home Biogas 6, which is like 4 cubic meters, that is going to give you up to 6 hours of cooking gas a day. And that would be the size for like a small farm, somebody who is doing a CSA project. So, part of what we do in the class and talking about biogas potential is thinking about how many organic residuals can you be collecting and thinking about the community partners that you need to really increase your potential. Because if you're a single person, I mean, think about how much food waste or food residuals you're going to produce a day. Not much, right?
Yeah.
No. But if you have like teenagers that don't finish their lunch or their breakfast, like me, I produce a bit more. And then you add on that I have livestock. And right now I am managing, oh gosh, like about 2 gallons of pig manure a day.
Okay.
So, so then that increases my capacity and how much I'm going to be putting into the biodigester. So for like us, we have 3 cubic meters worth of digester for our homesteads. That's like about a Home Biogas 4. Ooh, right here, look at this. So
Okay.
this
Yeah.
is the in-ground biodigester from my permaculture teacher, Andrew Faust.
Mm.
So this particular digester is integrated into his home. So during the growing season, it's online. So all the black water and gray water from his entire house goes into that digester. Isn't
Right.
that incredible?
Yeah. That's amazing.
I
So your
know.
own waste, it's what a perfect circle, right? It allows you to cook the food that then produces the waste.
Yeah, yeah. And what's really great about his system is that it is attached before the septic system. So during the winter, when it's not warm enough, he can actually valve it offline and then it goes out to his regular septic system. The
Perfect.
only tricky thing with these home systems that are attached to your entire home is that you have to be super water efficient,
Mm.
because you don't want to flush the microbes out of the digester before they finish doing their work.
Wow.
But in a house like Andrew's, they are super efficient and aware of that. So
Yeah.
just something to keep in mind with these integrated systems. So biogas, unlike propane, is carbon neutral and it's also lighter than air. And that's like a nice added safety feature to it. So some people ask me, are you worried about your biogas exploding in your house? And the answer is absolutely not, because propane is heavy and it falls to the floor, where biogas will just kind of float out of any crack if there's a leak and go out into the atmosphere. And I don't have a stove here in my home office, but what I like to show people is that when you light the stove, it only lights at the source. So if there is if God forbid, like I left the stove on with the pump and there was biogas in the air, I could still flick a switch and it's not going to ignite because it only lights right at the source because it disperses so quickly in the air. So it also does not have all the toxins in it that propane has, because it does have an element of hydrogen sulfide, which is toxic, but we have a scrubber that scrubs that out. So really, it is simple. It is safe when used appropriately, and it can be used for simple things such as cooking, which is the easiest use. But also, you could use it for a generator that could then be hooked up to charge like an electric motorbike, or to charge your computer in case of a power outage. So there you go. Basically, what we put into our biodigester and what comes out is completely all based on site. So everything that we put into our biodigester and what we get out, if we are feeding it food residuals, and manures that are from the site, and then we're using that liquid fertilizer to grow soil and burn off that methane, because when we burn it, it turns into C2O2. And so it's not that harmful CH4 that we're releasing. we are truly carbon neutral. And Dr. Shiva, I saw her at Omega, and she said that biogas is actually the tightest closed loop of recycling that she can think of, which I think is really incredible because it is totally common practice in India, even though it is very, very slowly, becoming more popular here in the States. So we think of the carbon cycle, and we were working on getting away from that linear method of like extracting nutrients from the earth and then basically, throwing them away, or, worse yet, burning them and going into the atmosphere. Instead, we are doing that total closed loop of recycling all of those nutrients. So everything that we put into our biodigester, we have nutrient conservation. All those nutrients going into the digester are available in the effluent, and are providing a full spectrum of plant nutrients needed for growing our plants without using fertilizer that is extracted from the earth.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. All right. So this is an illustration my mentor, Bob Hamburg, made. And I just like this because it kind of, illustrates for us that circular use and, using those natural systems. I mean, think of the system of decomposition and the nitrogen cycle. And all of that is happening, inside of our biodigesters. So, there's a lot of bad things that happen when we throw things away, and we know a lot about this in permaculture. So, like poorly managed food residuals, they bring in unwanted guests. They, invite flies, and with like open pit latrines that often are seen, like in Haiti. This is a really big problem in which flies are able to come in contact with human feces and then travel to food. And so what we are really working on doing with small scale biogas in rural areas is helping to separate people from waste, from human waste. We want to absolutely stay out of contact with human waste. So this is an example of like a home biogas toilet that can hook up to a digester. You can go to my class, www.biogaseducation.com. And there is a link at the top where you can sign up for email alerts about the early bird special, because my class is super affordable.
Yes.
You are getting like 1 hour per week live office sessions. So I have a class that happens at 7 p.m. where new material is introduced. So it's a total of 12 modules in the class. And so new material is introduced on the Wednesday night at 7, and then it repeats the following Wednesday at 6 a.m. for my students that are overseas. So if there was a class that you missed on a Wednesday night, guess what? You get to get up at 6 in the morning and join us. So it's really neat, because if you took advantage of like all of the Zooms, it's like you have the opportunity to attend like 1 hour per week, but really it's like bi-weekly as new material. And these are live sessions in which we are joining together as a community. People are sharing their questions and experiences and learning together. And so like we're all on this learning path, and then they get a workbook too. Basically, it's like your site design workbook. Wow. And so even if you just made it to class once a week and you were doing the workbook, by the time you are finished with your workbook at the end of the class, I'm like, guess what? You got your site design plan finished. You know how big your biodigester is going to be. You're going to know who are your partners, and where you're going to be getting your feedstocks from. And I always tell people, you are totally welcome to go on YouTube and figure it out yourself, but why?
I believe permaculture can be a solution to many of our world's problems. I like to think about permaculture as a philosophy that we can integrate into our gardens, into our communities, into our businesses. Those ethics and the principles are something that we're living and breathing as we go through our life.